Thank you, Chair. Peter, I thought your comments were very illuminating, to be honest with you. I want to focus on your discussion of providing services outside of the authority of the Child Welfare Agency, the other agencies that might be available to do the kind of services without involvement of the Child Welfare Agency. My question is, you talked about a helpline, and I've talked to several people down in Springfield about that very concept. How would you separate, or how would you peel off those services before we get to the involvement of the Child Welfare Agency? What kind of does your 50-state study actually discuss that portion of the problem? Because, like you said, a child welfare agency investigation is one of the most intrusive things that we can do. Can we get services to these folks before we have to do that? And how can that be done if the child welfare agency itself is in charge of administering those services?
That's an excellent question. And for the first time with this federal law, this Family First Preservation Services Act, we've got an open-ended entitlement where the federal government agencies have explicitly told the state leaders, you can define who is a candidate for that service very broadly, and you can use those dollars to actually support community-based agencies to provide family supports so that the family and the child doesn't have to touch the formal child welfare system. Because your concern is right. Up until that law, child welfare system, in a sense, had to sort of stay in a narrow lane. That federal law, the way it's being interpreted now, and some states, California, Washington, D.C., some other states have now actually have approved Family First state plans that allow them to push those services out further upstream than we've ever been able to do in our sort of child and family system. And it's now removing a barrier, which was a funding barrier to getting those dollars out to those upstream services to provide some supports more upstream. So it's a new challenge for us to navigate those federal regs and to make sure that Illinois can pull down the dollars that you deserve to tap into for those families. But that is the new breakthrough. Some of your state leaders were at a meeting we were just at in Denver, and where we were all discussing that in fact, that strategy, that opening, that finally the federal government is providing states to take advantage of.
Okay, you just swerved into something here. The issue of who controls the dollars, are you saying that the states have got more flexibility now to where these dollars are going to actually land, rather than in the hands of the Child Welfare Agency, where they'll be doled out to the various community-based organizations or other state agencies, if in fact that's where those services should come from? Are you saying that's a new broadening of authority that the state may have?
The dollars have to flow through the Child Welfare Agency, but the agency has greater flexibility in allocating those dollars to these more upstream community-based organizations than they've ever had before, or once it's all lined up properly through your processes. So yeah.
Okay, then let's take just a generic example here and say we've got a local agency dealing with housing or medical care or whatever the agency assists families in doing. Does the agency then, what's the mechanism here? And I'd like either Simone or somebody from the agency itself to answer the question is what's the procedure here? I mean, where do we begin? You talked about the helpline. Again, I'll go back to that. Without a hotline call, how do we get to the agency, the local organization, giving these services without there being that intermediate step where the child welfare agency is something other than just collecting vouchers and paying local service agencies? If what we're trying to do is give these services before the involvement of the child welfare agency, I have a hard time in my mind figuring out how the communication works among those in need, those providing care or services to alleviate that need, and then how that's being paid for without there being some kind of involvement with by the child welfare agency other than the person actually paying the bill.
Well, Mr. Reick, you've nailed it. That is exactly the question, and I defer to the department because I know they're in the middle of actually trying to work through these mechanisms. So, if someone in the department might want to speak up to that, it's an incredible opportunity.
We have about 300 people here from the Department of Children and Family Services. I'm sure some of them probably would be able to provide those answers, but I want to stay focused on what you talked about. Yes. In terms of providing these services outside the realm of the child welfare agency, because I agree with you. I think that the closer you get, I believe in the Catholic notion of subsidiarity. I believe that you should be governed by people as close to you as possible who can do the job. And I think that transfers here into this type of circumstance even more so. So if we can create a system where subsidiarity becomes the touchstone of what we're doing and not bring child welfare in unless there's an absolute need because there is actual abuse and or neglect, however it's defined in these times, I think we're all making strides here. Getting DCFS back to its core function of investigating abuse and neglect and taking it out of the wraparound services that would maybe someday lead to that, I think is a good thing. And I'd like to work with the agency. I really want to work with the agency on doing something that gives us that flexibility.
I don't know if the department wants to answer the question or wait until the end to kind of talk about that in the context of any of the other bills that we're referencing. Okay, thank you.
I don't believe I have any other questions. Peter, your presentation was great. I can't wait to see the written portion of what you're going to give to us, because I think it's a good start of an open discussion here of how we can better provide these services. So thank you for all that. I appreciate it very much.
You're very welcome, spokesperson.